Due to the pandemic, we've all had to adjust our behaviors to stay safe. This includes wearing masks and social distancing. How will that affect the 2021 legislative session when lawmakers are in close contact for many hours a day? Earlier today, we spoke with Senator Stuart Adams, president of the Utah Senate, about the changes they are implementing. Check it out.
President Adams, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Let's start the discussion off with talking about transparency. How will the government maintain transparency while taking safety precautions for the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it's great to be with you. You know, we've worked really hard with trying to not only maintain transparency, but to allow the public and others to have input on the legislative process. We all know that we come up with great ideas, or at least individually, we think our ideas are really great, but they're made better when the members of the legislature, our colleagues, look at those ideas but they're also made significantly better when the public weighs in. So we've done a lot of work to try to prepare for this legislative session to make sure that the public has the opportunity to weigh in on the things we're doing. We've built 4 new committee rooms very rapidly. We've made them bigger so that they can accommodate more people, social distance. They can accommodate legislators and social distance. And so if people want to come and be here in person, they can. If they want to do it remotely, we've actually put, our IT people have been worked very hard to put the IT resources in place, the cameras and the microphones, so people can actually be at home like I am today, and they can participate in the legislative session virtually, ask questions like they would be in the hearing, and the committee chair can respond to other committee members and the cameras will show them. So I think it's very important that the public has the opportunity to weigh in on the legislative issues we deal with. And we're taking a lot of time and spending a lot of money and trying to do it right so that the public can have proper access.
You talked about the extra room that will allow the public to come in and attend the session, but is there going to be a cap on the number of people allowed in the gallery and public meetings, and how will those people be chosen?
Yes, there will. We need to make sure that we social distance and the people's physical health is taken care of and watched out for and is safe. So there will be a limit, but if you want to be there, we're trying to accommodate that. But there'll be no limit to those that want to join virtually. And yeah, my impression is first come, first serve, and it'll be up to the actually Highway Patrol who will be monitoring the room. Again, just trying to keep it safe.
Do you know if there's going to be requirements for legislators to wear masks?
We're actually going to, when the legislators are on the floor, we're going to test twice a week, and rapid testing. And so we've looked at it in multiple different ways. We need to make sure that when legislators explain a bill or debate a bill, that they're clear and people understand what they're talking about. So we're not going to require masks while they're presenting those bills. And the challenge would be is if you're presenting a bill and you don't have a mask on and you have COVID, you're probably going to be spreading it. So we've come up with a process that we will be testing twice a week. No one can be on the chamber floor if they haven't been tested. And that's the way we're going to try to manage this as we go through the legislative session.
Will the rules for voting change, such as will legislators be able to vote remotely?
We've had the opportunity of having multiple special sessions, and in the Senate, we've had advice and consent almost every month. And that's been a blended process. And so some people have been in the chamber and some senators have actually been remote in their home or other locations. That process is going to continue on as we have during this past year. And again, if you want to vote, if you're there in person, you're going to have to be on the chamber floor. But if you're remote, you have to turn your camera on. We have to see you. You just can't be voting over the phone. You have to actually be visually recognized and vote that way. But that process will stay in the Senate the same.
Where can the public gather to have their voices heard by legislators? Or what's the best way for the public to communicate with their legislators during the session? And how will public comment work?
Well, historically, when we're in the chamber, what we've had is we've had a sergeant at arms and individuals outside the chamber. And if somebody wanted to talk to us or communicate with us, they'd fill out what we call blue notes, or blue pieces of paper. They'd send notes into us. That's probably, we eliminated that toward the end of the session with COVID last legislative session, and we'll probably not reinstitute it this session. But we do have interns that come from the colleges and universities that will still be with us, and they'll have cell phones, and we'll be able to communicate with them. And those that want to talk, at least while we're on the Senate floor, can communicate with our intern, which we think is a safer way. And if the public want to participate, it's really actually a better or more transparent way to do it virtually, because you really don't have to leave your home. You don't have to come up and park. You don't have to come up and find a way or what committee room. You just log on and you're able to give your input, I think, more efficiently than you would last session.
President Adams, I know you're busy. We appreciate you carving out time to talk to us tonight. Happy holidays, and thanks for joining us on the show.
Again, thanks for inviting me.
We've had to go through a pretty steep learning curve this year in terms of how we can reinvent our procedures and how we can kind of re-engineer what we do to do it in a different way.
That was Representative Brad Wilson, the Speaker of the Utah House of Representatives, on the changes being made for the upcoming legislative session. Thanks for staying with us for our In Focus discussion on the COVID-19 legislative session. So many factors and people in play when our elected officials work on our laws every year. Lobbyists play a significant part in that process. So what do these new safety protocols mean for them? Joining us now in studio is Renae Cowley from Foxley Pignanelli, a Utah lobbying firm. Renae, thank you so much for being here tonight and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rosie.
Renae, let's start with the basics. Why are lobbyists necessary during the Utah legislative sessions?
Well, lobbyists are hired by businesses, industries, trade associations, and other activist associations. We represent these voices in public policy. So we're representing the voices of small and large business owners, job creators, innovators, those who keep the economy humming and advocate for their employees' well-being and interests. These are important voices to consider for legislators when creating public policy.
Obviously, just the act of lobbying takes up a lot of time, and I can see why some organizations would need those to be up on Capitol Hill to kind of listen, right, and represent on behalf of them. Help us run through some of the hard and fast rules about what a lobbyist can and can't do with elected officials.
Absolutely. There are very, very clear and strict laws governing how lobbyists can interact with legislators. This is everything from the types of interactions we can have. Many years ago, they cracked down on how lobbying can be conducted in the state of Utah. For example, sporting events. Lobbyists can't take legislators to sporting events. Expensive meals were limited to the same per diem that all state employees are. It's about $42-ish. So it's difficult to take someone out to a lavish meal on $42. And there are also very specific laws governing how we communicate with legislators. Did you know that lobbyists are in fact legally prohibited from knowingly sharing false information with a legislator? If we do so, we are in jeopardy of losing not only our license to conduct our business and our profession, but we also lose our credibility with lawmakers. And frankly, that is our professional currency. Lobbyists are also, in fact, barred from serving on certain commissions, such as the very important Commission on Redistricting that's going to be monopolizing many of our 2021 political discussions.
I did not know that, but I always learn something on this show, and it's reassuring to know that there are guidelines that help keep lobbyists and their interactions with elected officials in line. Now, Utah considers lobbying to fall into one of two categories: meetings and events. So let's talk about events first. How has the pandemic changed how lobbying events are handled? Are there fewer events and are they less public?
So the Capitol and the legislature have decided to cancel all public meetings and organized gatherings at the Capitol during the upcoming legislative session. Now, what these typically are is an opportunity for trade associations or activists to gather together and advocate directly with their lawmakers on behalf of whatever topic interests them the most. So I'm talking about nursing associations, aerospace industry, and even artworks programs in elementary schools. By the way, those are all industries that I represent. They are now no longer in this session going to be able to gather publicly and have that unique one-on-one interaction with their lawmakers. And it was a difficult decision that the legislature had to make, but it was in the interest of public health and safety. So now these individuals are going to have to be very vigilant in reaching out to these legislators, either through text messages, emails, phone calls, or otherwise.
And then let's talk about meetings just real quick. I'm guessing that the meetings have been replaced, like everything else, through like Zoom or Skype. So does a video recording of these meetings change how they're conducted and reported?
Yeah, Rosie, like I think many professionals in 2020, my work wardrobe this year has consisted of blouses, blazers, and sweatpants. So Zoom has been how many lobbyists and legislators have communicated during the pandemic. What's interesting about these Zoom calls is that there are not a lot of structure around how they're conducted right now. Let's say I was having a meeting one-on-one, face-to-face with a legislator. That wouldn't be a disclosable event. However, in a Zoom meeting, if it is recorded, it is treated as a government record under the GRAMA Act. Now, what that stands for is the Government Records Access and Management Act. And so it'll be treated, that Zoom recording would be treated just like an email or text message sent to a legislator. It would be public and accessible to anyone seeking that information.
All right, we have time for about one more question left. I do want to get to this final question. What would you say to the citizens of Utah who may be worried that things might not be as transparent as they would be during a regular legislative session?
The pandemic has forced innovation, and the legislature has innovated. The silver lining to this pandemic is that with a hybrid session, both in person and remote, it's actually going to allow for greater access and public participation for many who otherwise have not been able to do so. I'm talking about those who live in rural Utah, who have demanding jobs that can't get off work in order to testify in person, or maybe can't access childcare as readily. So now these individuals will be able to participate remotely. I would encourage anyone who is impacted or interested by issues that are being discussed in the upcoming session that they get involved. Talk to your legislators, send them an email, a text message, come to the Capitol and testify in person, armed with a mask and a gallon of hand sanitizer, or do so remotely. But government works best when people are engaged, both as activists and as watchdogs.
Now talk about a new normal. All right, you've been hearing from Renae Cowley, a lobbyist with Foxley and Pignanelli. Renae, thank you so much for being on the show, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Rosie. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on the COVID-19 legislative session. Lawmakers represent the citizens of Utah. They made their voices heard during the election, but they can also speak out during the legislative process. But what happens if they don't have access because of the pandemic? And will they be able to see what the legislature is doing like they would in a normal year? Joining us now to talk about this subject via Zoom is Lauren Simpson, the Policy Director for Alliance for a Better Utah. Lauren, thanks for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Rosie.
Lauren, transparency is a big issue when talking about how the government works. In a normal year, how would you rate the transparency of the legislative sessions in Utah?
I would give it a solid D. And I think that's something that we need to think about moving into this session. The legislature already has pretty significant issues with transparency because most major decisions that are made on Capitol Hill are made behind closed doors. Those decisions are made, in closed caucus meetings or, in the Rules Committee where that's a meeting that's not streamed to the public. And so I can understand why a lot of people are concerned looking at the session that there will be even less transparency than there is normally.
Now, going off of your last answer right there, when you're talking about, understanding why citizens should be concerned, let's talk about the upcoming session and the restrictions that are going to be put in place because of the pandemic. How do these new guidelines, these new safety protocols, kind of add another layer of concern there?
Well, like some of your guests on the program tonight have already said, in some ways, these new protocols will improve transparency. For example, normally Video is not streamed for committee meetings, it's audio only. And this year we are going to have video. Like people have said, this year, members of the public will be able to participate in committee meetings, be able to speak up from the comfort of their own homes. And you know, the Capitol is hard to access, and we get that. So in some ways it's looking better, but in some ways it's more difficult to contact your lawmaker when doing it in person might not be a safe option for you.
So follow-up question, with that being said, are you optimistic that maybe there will be more transparency with a lot of these things being streamed online and people being able to jump in digitally?
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope that all of these new things that we're doing this year, we can take and continue into the future. There's no reason that we shouldn't have video in every single meeting that happens. You know, when the legislature is meeting, of course we should have video. So I'm really hopeful that we can take the things that we're implementing now and continue them moving forward.
Let's talk about lobbying. Our last guest was a lobbyist. What's your take on how these new COVID-19 safety protocols is going to impact that interaction between lobbyists and our lawmakers?
Yeah, and on the one hand, you have paid lobbyists whose job it is to be up at the Capitol interacting with lawmakers. And on the other hand, you know, every single member of the public has the right to lobby or, you know, talk to their representative or their senator about their beliefs and about their views on these, you know, really important issues of policy. And so I think the impetus is really on lawmakers this year to be extra sensitive and extra responsive to the calls, the texts, and the emails that they get.
What do you think that the impact will be on other aspects of public interaction like protesting and gathering? And do you have any recommendations for Utahns who normally get involved this way?
Yeah, and I know that's going to be a big deal to a lot of activists because I feel like every year, you know, there's something that deserves a protest on the Hill. And so I hope that this year people continue to put their safety first and the safety of their neighbors first, but continue to exercise their First Amendment rights in protest. And I think we'll see a lot of Utahns' creativity come out. You know, this might not be the year for a lot of shouting or yelling, you know, or standing in crowds, but it might be a year for being really creative with signs or visuals or music. So I'm excited to see what people do, and I'm really hopeful that we can have a good, robust discussion while still keeping everybody safe.
Lauren, we have about 30 seconds left. I really just want to know if there's anything else you wanted to include that I didn't ask you, maybe what your outlook's going to be like in this upcoming year, or if you have any other concerns about this upcoming legislative session.
I think one of the gifts that the session has given to us is that everyone is really concerned about transparency, and it's a good opportunity for us to take a step back and look at the way that the legislature operates as a whole. You know, do closed caucus meetings serve the general public? Because that's who the legislature is supposed to serve. And so I think it's a good opportunity for us to all take stock and reevaluate, you know, all the ways that we can make the legislative session more transparent and help make sure that our lawmakers are being more accountable to the public.
It's definitely going to be a year and a session to watch. All right, you've been hearing from Lauren Simpson, the Policy Director for Alliance for a Better Utah. Lauren, thank you so much for joining our discussion tonight. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you so much, Rosie. You too.